Guard kicks Tiffany and Marla out of event, didn't know who they were. Tiffany's hands shook as she applied her third coat of mascara. The bathroom mirror was clouded with steam from her hour-long shower, but she could still see the dark circles under her eyes. Double shifts at the diner for 3 months straight had left their mark. "Girl, you better hurry up," Marla's voice carried through the thin apartment walls. "We've got exactly 2 hours until the event starts." "Just 5 more minutes," Tiffany called back, though she knew it would be longer. Everything had to be perfect tonight. Everything. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Mom calling. Tiffany's stomach clenched as she hit decline. She couldn't deal with that conversation right now. Couldn't handle another lecture about responsibility and paying back the money she'd borrowed. In the living room, Marla was already dressed, pacing in circles around the coffee table that was really just a cardboard box covered with a tablecloth. Her royal blue dress caught the light from the single working lamp, making the cheap sequins sparkle almost convincingly. What if they can tell? Marla stopped pacing, her face pinched with worry. What if they look at us and just know we don't belong? Tiffany emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in her threadbare towel. "That's why we spent all that money, Mar. To belong." She picked up the dress laid out on her bed, red, tight, with a slit that went higher than anything she'd ever worn before. Besides, money can't buy class. Look at those Real Housewives shows. "Yeah, but money can buy real Gucci," Marla muttered, fingering the fake designer bag they'd bought from a street vendor. "Not whatever this is." "Stop it!" Tiffany grabbed her friend's shoulders. "We've been planning this for months. We're gonna walk in there like we own the place. Like we've been going to fancy charity events our whole lives." "And the invitations?" Marla's voice dropped to a whisper, like someone might be listening. "You are sure they're legit?" Tiffany walked to her dresser and pulled out the envelope they'd gotten 2 weeks ago. The paper was thick, expensive feeling. The gold lettering caught the light just right. The guy guaranteed they're real. Said he gets them all the time from people who can't make it. $5,000, Marla whispered, shaking her head. "My husband thinks I'm saving up for a car down payment." "And you will be," Tiffany assured her, starting to step into her dress. "Once we get in there, make the right connections. This is our chance, Mar. Our one shot to be more than just another waitress and receptionist." The next hour was a blur of hairspray, double-sided tape, and increasingly desperate attempts to make their drugstore makeup look expensive. They'd watched dozens of YouTube tutorials, practiced their walks in borrowed heels, even rehearsed their backstories. "Remember," Tiffany said as she carefully applied her red lipstick, "your father owns a chain of hardware stores in the Midwest. And your dad's on the board." Marla nodded, adjusting her push-up bra for the 100th time. "Was on the board," Tiffany corrected. "He's more focused on his ventures in Asia now." The lie felt smooth on her tongue after weeks of practice. Better than the truth, that her father had left when she was 12 and the closest thing to a board he'd ever seen was the menu at McDonald's. Their Uber driver gave them a long look when they climbed into his Toyota Corolla, clearly wondering what 2 women in evening gowns were doing in this neighborhood. Tiffany stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice. This was just the beginning. Soon they'd be the ones giving looks, not receiving them. "I think I am gonna throw up," Marla whispered as they hit traffic near downtown. "Don't you dare." Tiffany grabbed her hand. "This dress is rented and I can't afford to lose the deposit." They both laughed, but it was tight, nervous. Through the car window, they could see the city's elite heading to their evening entertainments. Men in tuxedos, women dripping in jewels. Soon they'd be among them. Just had to get through the door first. The car pulled up half a block from the venue. Tiffany had insisted on this. No one who was anyone got dropped off right at the entrance in a Corolla with a dented fender. "Okay." Tiffany took a deep breath, checking her lipstick one last time in her compact mirror. "Remember what we practiced. Small steps. Back straight. Look bored, like you've seen it all before." "Bored. Right." Marla nodded, but her eyes were wide as saucers as they took in the building ahead. "Oh God, is that a real red carpet?" "Act like you've walked 100 of them." Tiffany squared her shoulders. In her head, she could hear her mother's voice. "Who do you think you are?" She pushed it away. Tonight, she could be anyone she wanted. They walked toward the entrance, their borrowed heels clicking against the pavement. Every step felt like a victory and a terror. Groups of obviously wealthy people streamed past them, the air thick with expensive perfume and the quiet confidence of old money. "There's the checkpoint," Marla whispered, clutching her fake designer clutch like a lifeline. Tiffany saw him then, the guard. He stood like a statue in his crisp uniform, checking credentials with mechanical precision. Something in his eyes made her pause mid-step. "What's wrong?" Marla asked, nearly bumping into her. "Nothing." Tiffany reached into her bag, feeling for the envelope. Her fingers brushed against it, and relief flooded through her. "Nothing at all. This is our night, remember?" They joined the line, watching as guest after guest was smoothly admitted. Tiffany found herself studying their movements, their expressions. A woman in diamonds laughed at something her companion said, and Tiffany practiced the same laugh under her breath. Another woman air-kissed an acquaintance, 2 inches between cheeks, no actual contact. Tiffany filed that away too. Next, the guard called. Tiffany's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. But her voice came out steady, practiced. "Good evening." She reached into her bag for the envelope that had cost them everything, the envelope that would change their lives forever. Her fingers touched leather, metal, paper. But not the thick, expensive paper they needed. She dug deeper, feeling the first bead of sweat roll down her back. The guard waited, his face unreadable. "Is there a problem, miss?" His voice was professionally neutral, but Tiffany caught the slight edge to it. Just a second." She opened her clutch wider, hands trembling as she removed items one by one. Phone. Lipstick. Compact mirror. Gum wrapper. The couple behind them shifted impatiently. "We have our invitations." Marla jumped in, her voice too high. "Tiff, remember? You were going to carry both since my clutch was too small." Tiffany's stomach dropped. She had been supposed to carry both. She remembered tucking them into her bag that morning, placing them carefully between her day planner and her wallet. Her wallet. The wallet she'd switched out at the last minute because the other one didn't match her dress. "Oh, God," she whispered. The guard's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd seen this before. The slight panic, the fumbling, the excuses about to begin. 17 years on the job had taught him to spot the real from the fake, and something about these two had felt off from the moment they stepped into line. "Miss, if you don't have your invitation?" "I do," Tiffany's voice cracked. I did. I switched bags and—" "They're probably still in her other purse," Marla said quickly. "We could run back and get them. 20 minutes, tops." A few people in line behind them started to whisper. Tiffany felt their stares like physical touches, burning through her rented dress to the frightened waitress underneath. "Step aside, please," the guard said firmly. "There are other guests waiting." "No, you don't understand." Tiffany leaned closer, lowering her voice. We paid so much for these tickets. Please, can't you just—" "Step aside." The words fell like stones in the suddenly quiet air. Tiffany stood frozen, feeling her carefully constructed world beginning to crack around the edges. Marla tugged at her arm. "Tiff, maybe we should." "No!" Tiffany jerked away from her friend's touch. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything they'd sacrificed. Not after all the planning, the lying, the missed rent payments. The guard's hand moved to his radio, and reality crashed in like a wave. Tiffany Matthews, waitress, dreamer, hustler, was about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. Sometimes the door between who you are and who you want to be is locked for a reason. The world seemed to shrink to the size of a pinhead. Tiffany's fingers trembled as she emptied her clutch onto the small table beside the security checkpoint, her belongings scattered like evidence of her deception. Each item felt like a confession. Drugstore lipstick, not MAC. Phone with a cracked screen, not the latest iPhone. Keys with a plastic rainbow keychain, not a Gucci fob. "Ma'am?" The guard's voice cut through her panic. "I won't ask again. Please step aside." A woman in a designer gown Tiffany recognized from magazine covers whispered to her companion, "Really, they'll let anyone try these days." The words stung like a slap. Tiffany felt her face burn as she remembered practicing that exact tone in her mirror, that bored, entitled drawl that seemed to come so naturally to the truly wealthy. "Listen." She stepped closer to the guard, dropping her voice. I know the invitations are in my other bag. I can prove it. Just let me make a few calls. Marcus Johnson had been working security at elite events for nearly 2 decades. He'd seen every trick, heard every excuse. Something in this girl's desperation was different though. Raw, more genuine. But rules were rules. Miss, there's a line forming, he gestured to the growing crowd behind them. I cannot make exceptions. Marla grabbed Tiffany's arm, her nails digging in through the thin fabric. Tiff, maybe we should just go. This isn't. No, Tiffany jerked away, her voice rising. No, we're not going anywhere. Do you know how much we paid for these tickets? A photographer turned their way, scenting drama. The flash of his camera made Tiffany flinch, but she stood her ground. I need to speak to your supervisor, she demanded, trying to channel every entitled customer she'd ever served at the diner. This is completely unacceptable. Marcus reached for his radio, but didn't call it in yet. My supervisor will tell you the same thing. No invitation, no entry. Those are the rules for everyone. Everyone? Tiffany laughed, the sound brittle. I just watched you wave through half a dozen people without even checking their invitations. Those guests are known to us, Marcus replied evenly. Regular patrons. Of course they are. Tiffany's voice cracked. Of course. Because they belong here, right? Because they were born into the right families. Went to the right schools. Married the right people. More phones were coming out now, recording. Marla tried to shield her face, but Tiffany was beyond caring. You know what? I serve these people every day, she continued, her voice rising. I bring them their egg white omelets, and their gluten-free toast, and their $5 lattes. I listen to them complain about their housekeepers and their personal trainers and their divorce lawyers. And you know what? They're not special. They're just lucky. A small crowd had gathered now, watching the scene unfold with that particular mix of discomfort and fascination reserved for public meltdowns. Tiff, Marla pleaded. People are filming. But Tiffany was on a roll, years of swallowed pride and forced smiles boiling over. You think I don't know what these invitations cost? You think I don't know what everything in there costs? I know exactly what it costs, because I spend my life calculating how many hours of work each thing would take. That woman's dress? She pointed to a stunned socialite. That's 6 months of rent. Her necklace? That's a year of college tuition I couldn't afford. Marcus's hand finally moved to his radio. Security to front entrance. We have a situation. A situation? Tiffany's laugh was borderline hysterical now. Is that what I am? A situation? She fumbled in her scattered belongings, grabbing her phone. I am calling Jennifer. She's on the committee. She'll sort this out. Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to step away from the entrance, Marcus said, his voice firm but not unkind. He'd seen enough to know this night wasn't going to end well for anyone. Tiffany's trembling fingers scrolled through her contacts. Jennifer's number, the one they'd been given by the guy who sold them the invitations, went straight to voicemail. She's not answering, Marla whispered, stating the obvious. Tiff, please, let's just go. But Tiffany was already dialing another number, her father's. The father she'd bragged was on the board. The father who was supposed to be in Tokyo on business. The father who, in reality, hadn't answered her calls in 8 years. The automated message played in her ear. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Something inside Tiffany broke. All the careful preparations, all the practiced lines and rehearsed walks, all the dreams of a different life, they shattered like a champagne flute dropped on marble floors. 2 more security guards appeared, flanking Marcus. The message was clear. Leave now, or be removed. Marla tugged at her arm again, and this time Tiffany didn't resist. Her legs felt wooden as she bent to gather her scattered belongings, aware of every phone camera trained on her, every whispered comment. Wait, she said suddenly, straightening up. My phone. Where's my phone? The cracked iPhone lay face down on the ground where she'd dropped it. The screen was dark, completely shattered now. Like a sign from the universe, some things, once broken, can't be fixed. As they turned to leave, a sleek black car pulled up to the entrance. The crowd parted, and out stepped a woman Tiffany recognized from the website, Jennifer. The real Jennifer. Not the Jennifer they'd been texting. Not the Jennifer who'd promised them access to this world. Jennifer, Tiffany called out, one last desperate attempt. Jennifer, please. But Jennifer walked past them without a glance, air-kissing acquaintances as she went. 2 inches between cheeks, no actual contact, just like Tiffany had practiced. The cool evening air hit them like a wake-up call as they stumbled away from the entrance. Their rented heels, already pinching, felt impossible to walk in now. Everything felt impossible. What do we do now? Marla asked, her voice small. Tiffany looked down at her red dress, at the security tag she'd carefully hidden under a fold of fabric, at the dress she'd never be able to return now, not with the makeup stains, and the smell of desperation soaked into its fibers. I don't know, she whispered. I really don't know. Behind them, the party continued. Music drifted out into the night, along with the tinkling of expensive jewelry and even more expensive laughter. The sound followed them down the street, a reminder of everything they'd tried to grasp and everything they'd lost in the attempt. Marla's mascara had left black tracks down her cheeks, but she didn't bother to wipe them away. My husband's going to kill me, she said. All that money. The money? Tiffany echoed. The reality of what they'd done was starting to sink in. $5,000 each for fake invitations. Money borrowed, stolen, scraped together from 100 little lies and compromises. A group of actual guests walked past them, giving them a wide berth. One woman's diamond bracelet caught the streetlight, sending prisms dancing across the pavement. You know what the worst part is? Tiffany said, watching the light show. For a minute there, I really thought we'd make it. I really thought we could just decide to be different people. A taxi drove past, ignoring Marla's raised hand. Of course, who would stop for two women in evening gowns, clearly out of place, clearly in the middle of some kind of breakdown? Maybe we should call an Uber, Marla suggested. Tiffany checked her shattered phone. Dead. Of course it was dead. Everything about this night was dead. I think, she said slowly, I think I need a drink first. They looked at each other, mascara stained and broken-heeled, and something like understanding passed between them. They weren't the first to try to crash these gates, and they wouldn't be the last. But tonight, they were in it together. McDonald's is still open, Marla offered. They have those new fancy coffees. Tiffany looked back at the building one last time, at the glittering lights, and the red carpet, and the life she'd tried so hard to grab onto. Then she looked at her best friend, standing there in her fake designer dress and real tears. Yeah, she said. Yeah, McDonald's sounds about right. They started walking, their heels click-clacking against the pavement in an uneven rhythm. Behind them, the party continued, but its music was already fading, becoming just another sound in a city full of dreams and dreamers, winners and losers, those who belonged, and those who were still trying to find their place. The night wasn't over yet, but this chapter of it, the chapter of pretending to be something they weren't, had come to an end. What came next would be harder in some ways, facing the consequences, paying the debts, admitting the truth. But at least they wouldn't have to do it in borrowed shoes and rented dresses. As they walked away from the life they'd tried to steal, Tiffany thought about all the shifts she'd need to pick up, to pay back what they'd lost. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, they had McDonald's French fries and friendship, and the kind of clarity that only comes after everything falls apart. Tiffany felt something break inside her. It wasn't just the humiliation of being caught. It was the shattering of every dream, every carefully constructed lie she'd told herself about belonging in this world. Ma'am, this is your final warning, Marcus said, his hand still on his radio. Leave now, or we'll have to involve the police. The word police echoed in her head like a death sentence. Behind her, she could hear the murmurs growing louder, the phones recording, the whispered judgments. You stupid, stupid girl, she whispered to herself, hands shaking as she tried to gather her scattered belongings from the security table. Her phone slipped from her trembling fingers, cracking against the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo her own breaking point. Just look at them. A woman in Valentino's stage, whispered to her companion. The dress isn't even properly fitted. And those shoes? Definitely knockoffs. Marla's face crumpled. Tiff, please, let's just... No. Tiffany spun around, her voice rising hysterically. No, I want them to say it to my face. Come on. She faced the growing crowd. Tell me what you really think. Tell me how I don't belong here. A fashion blogger she recognized from Instagram was live streaming the whole thing. Oh my God, you guys, this is insane. These two tried to crash the charity gala with fake invitations. Security is about to. Fake? Tiffany laughed, the sound brittle and dangerous. You want to talk about fake? Look around, everything here is fake. The smiles, the air kisses, the pretending to care about charity while spending more on a handbag than most people make in a month. Marcus stepped forward, his expression stern, but not unkind. Miss, please don't make this worse than it needs to be. Worse? Tiffany's voice cracked. How could it possibly get worse? We spent everything we had on those invitations. Everything. And for what? To try to be part of this circus? More security guards were approaching now, drawn by the commotion. Phones continued recording, catching every second of their downfall. You know what the funny thing is? Tiffany continued, tears streaming down her face now, ruining her carefully applied makeup. I serve these people every day at the diner. I know their coffee orders, their dietary restrictions, their complaints about their housekeepers. They don't even see me. I am just furniture to them. Miss, if you don't leave now, Marcus began. I am going, Tiffany shouted. But first, let me tell you something about your precious guests. That woman there? She pointed to a stunned socialite. She comes to my diner every Sunday and leaves exactly 7% tip because she doesn't believe in rewarding the service industry too much. And him? She gestured to a man in an expensive suit. He hits on every waitress under 30 and then complains to management when we don't laugh at his jokes. Oh my God, Marla moaned, trying to hide her face from the cameras. Tiff, stop. But Tiffany was beyond stopping. Years of swallowed pride, forced smiles, and suppressed rage were pouring out of her like a burst dam. You want to know what real fake is? Her voice echoed off the marble walls. It's spending your whole life being told that if you just work hard enough, if you just want it badly enough, you can have anything. But that's the biggest lie of all, isn't it? Because no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we save, no matter how perfectly we copy your clothes and your manners and your stupid air kisses, we'll never be you. And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing. A sleek black car pulled up to the entrance, and out stepped the real Jennifer. The woman whose name they'd dropped so confidently, whose connection they'd claimed so boldly. She walked past them without a glance, her heels clicking against the marble in a perfect rhythm that Tiffany had spent hours trying to replicate in her cramped apartment. The sight of her seemed to drain the fight from Tiffany all at once. Her shoulders slumped, and suddenly she felt every pinch of her too tight shoes, every scratch of the cheap fabric against her skin. Come on, Mar, she said quietly. Let's go home. Home? Marla laughed through her tears. How? We spent our last 20 on the Uber here. They stumbled away from the entrance, the sound of laughter and music following them like a mocking soundtrack. Marla's heel snapped halfway down the block, the cheap plastic giving way with a crack that seemed to summarize their entire evening. Perfect, Marla muttered, limping along. Just perfect. You know what the worst part is, Tiff? For a minute there, I really believed we could do it. I really thought we could be them. Tiffany looked back at the building one last time, at the glittering lights and the beautiful people, and the life she'd tried so desperately to steal a piece of. Her makeup was running, her dress was stained with tears, and her dreams were lying in pieces around her like the shards of her broken phone. A group of real guests walked past them, giving them a wide berth. One woman's diamond bracelet caught the streetlight, sending prisms dancing across the pavement. The same bracelet Tiffany had bookmarked on multiple websites, calculating how many double shifts it would take to afford even a replica. You know what, Mar? Tiffany said, watching the light show. Maybe we were trying to be the wrong people all along. They reached the corner where their Uber had dropped them off just an hour ago. Was it only an hour? It felt like a lifetime had passed. The city bustled around them, indifferent to their small tragedy. Somewhere in those glittering towers, people were making deals, forming connections, living the life they'd tried so desperately to grab onto. But not tonight. Tonight, they'd learned a different kind of lesson about who they were and who they weren't allowed to be. About the doors that money could open and the ones that stayed firmly closed no matter how hard you knocked. I need a drink, Marla said finally, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. A real drink, Not one of those fancy cocktails we practiced pronouncing. Tiffany looked down at her rented dress, at the security tag she'd carefully hidden under a fold of fabric. At the dress she'd never be able to return now, not with the makeup stains and the smell of desperation soaked into its fibers. "McDonald's is still open," she offered. "And I've got about $3 in quarters in my other purse." They looked at each other, really looked at each other. Past the fake designer clothes and the practice poses and the borrowed confidence, they saw what they really were. Two working-class girls who dared to dream too big, who tried to skip the line in life and learned the hard way that some doors stay closed, no matter how nicely you knock. "McDonald's?" Marla nodded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "At least they don't check invitations." They started walking, one of them barefoot now, both of them broken in ways that had nothing to do with physical injuries. Behind them, the party continued, but its music was already fading, becoming just another sound in a city full of dreams and dreamers, winners and losers, those who belonged and those who were still trying to find their place. The night wasn't over yet, but this chapter of it, the chapter of pretending to be something they weren't, had come to an end. What came next would be harder in some ways, facing the consequences, paying the debts, admitting the truth. But at least they wouldn't have to do it in borrowed shoes and rented dresses. The McDonald's sign cast a harsh yellow glow across their faces. Tiffany stared at her reflection in the darkened window, barely recognizing herself beneath the smeared makeup and crushed dreams. "Welcome to McDonald's," the teenage cashier said, his eyes widening at their evening gowns. "Can I, take your order?" "2 large fries," Tiffany said, her voice hoarse from crying. "And what do you have for $3.42? The cashier shifted uncomfortably. "I can do 1 large fries and 2 small coffees for that." "Perfect." Tiffany turned to Marla, who was huddled in a corner booth, frantically trying to revive her dead phone. "Mar, coffee okay?" "Nothing about this is okay," Marla whispered, "but not it anyway." They sat in silence as the cashier counted their pile of quarters and dimes. A group of drunk college students stumbled in, taking photos of them not so subtly. "Great," Tiffany muttered. "More social media content." Speaking of, Marla had managed to connect to the free Wi-Fi. Her face went pale. "Oh God, Tiff, look at this." She turned her phone screen toward Tiffany. Twitter was exploding with their story, but it wasn't just about them anymore. Dozens of posts were appearing from other victims, all with the same story. "Got scammed trying to get into the opera gala," Tiffany read aloud. "Paid $5K for fake invitations. Same thing happened at the Modern Art Museum fundraiser." She looked up at Marla. "How many people did this guy scam?" "I am counting at least 15 posts so far," Marla scrolled through her feed. "And those are just the ones admitting it publicly." 15 times 5,000. Tiffany's voice trailed off. $75,000, Marla finished. "Minimum." The cashier brought their order, setting it down carefully like they might break. There's some reporters outside asking about 2 women in evening gowns. Should I tell them?" "We're not here," Tiffany said quickly. "Please." He nodded, understanding in his young face. "Back doors through the kitchen. My sister got scammed by one of those fake modeling agencies last year. Sometimes you just need a quiet exit." "Thank you," Marla whispered. They sat in their corner booth, picking at their fries, watching more news vans pull up outside. "I should call Derek," Marla said, staring at her phone. "He's going to see this anyway. Might as well hear it from me." "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth. That I am an idiot who gave our car savings to a con man, because I wanted to pretend to be something I am not." Tiffany reached across the table and grabbed her friend's hand. "We're both idiots. But we're idiots together." "Yeah, well, being idiots together won't pay back my credit cards," Marla's voice cracked. "Or your loan from Tony." "Oh God, Tiff, Tony's going to kill you." "Not if I work double shifts for the next 6 years." Tiffany tried to laugh, but it came out more like a sob. A notification popped up on Marla's phone. Someone had tagged them in a post. The video of their meltdown at the entrance was going viral. "Listen to these comments," Marla read, her voice shaking. "When trash tries to go class. This is what happens when you shop at Forever 21 instead of Fendi. Security guard deserves a raise for keeping these fakes out." "Stop," Tiffany grabbed the phone. "Just stop." But Marla wasn't done. Here is more. People are sharing screenshots of the guy's old Instagram posts. The ones where he promised to get us in. Look at the comments. So many people fell for it. He had fake business cards, a fake office address, a very real PayPal account, Tiffany added bitterly. Someone's starting a Facebook group for victims, Marla continued scrolling. They're talking about filing a class action lawsuit. Against who? A ghost? Tiffany laughed hollowly. He's probably on a beach somewhere by now, spending our money on real designer clothes. The door chimed as more customers entered. Through the window, they could see camera crews setting up, reporters touching up their makeup. We need to get out of here. Tiffany stood up. I am not becoming the midnight news story. They slipped through the kitchen, nodding thanks to the young cashier who held the back door open for them. The alley was dark and smelled like old grease, but at least there were no cameras. You know what the worst part is? Marla said, as they waited for the bus in their ruined finery. For a while there, it felt so real. All those text messages from Jennifer. All those promises about connections and opportunities. We wanted it to be real, Tiffany corrected. So badly that we ignored every red flag. A police car cruised by slowly, the officer inside giving them a long look. Tiffany wondered if they'd already heard about the scam, if they were looking for victims or suspects. My mom always said if something seems too good to be true. Marla started. It's probably being sold by a con man in a fake Rolex, Tiffany finished. They both laughed, and for a moment it felt almost okay. Almost. What do we do now? Marla asked, her voice small. First, we file a police report. Not that it'll help, that money's gone. Then, Tiffany took a deep breath. Then we face the music, tell the truth, pay our debts. And after that, we go back to being us. Just, maybe a little wiser. The last bus of the night pulled up, its headlights illuminating their tear-stained faces. The driver took one look at them and waved them on without paying. As they rode through the darkened city, past the glittering towers and exclusive clubs where they'd once dreamed of belonging, Tiffany thought about Marcus, the guard. He'd known. He'd taken one look at them and known they didn't belong. Not because of their dresses or their bags or their makeup, but because belonging wasn't something you could buy. It wasn't something you could fake. Hey, Marla nudged her. Look. Outside the window, the event venue was still lit up. Guests were leaving now, climbing into luxury cars, heading to exclusive after-parties. For a moment, Tiffany let herself imagine a different ending. One where their invitations had been real, where they'd walk through those doors and into a different life. It's better this way, she said finally. Better? How is this better? Because now we know. We know we can't buy our way in. We can't fake our way in. If we want in. Tiffany squeezed her friend's hand. We'll have to make it for real. The bus rolled on through the night, carrying them back to their real lives, back to double shifts and discount stores and dreams that would have to wait, but at least they were going back together. At least they had that. Marcus Johnson finished his shift at 2 a.m., unaware that his correct instincts had saved the museum from a potentially larger scandal. His supervisor had already received alerts about similar scams at other venues, fake invitations, fake connections, real money disappearing into untraceable accounts. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, two best friends rode a city bus in borrowed finery, learning the hard way that some doors stay closed no matter how nicely you knock. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Maybe the real trick wasn't trying to be someone else, but figuring out how to be yourself in a world that didn't always make that easy. Hey Mar, Tiffany said softly. Yeah? Next time we want to change our lives, let's try something easier. Like robbing a bank. Marla laughed through her tears. Deal. The city lights blurred past the bus windows, each one a little reminder of the dreams they'd tried to catch. But dreams, like designer dresses, sometimes come with price tags too high to pay. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is return them unworn, tags still attached, and start saving for something that actually fits. The night wasn't over, but its lessons were clear. You can't buy your way into belonging. You can't fake your way into a different life. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't getting kicked out of the party. It's admitting you were never really invited in the first place.